Hey guys, it's the WalterFootball.com After Dark Show for September 25th, 2024. We're going to be doing the Week 4 NFL picks against the spread, as usual on Tuesdays. Joined this week by Andy Iskoe. We'll get to the intros in 1 second. Andy is of thelogicalapproach.com, as you can see on the screen. Before we get to that, though, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Visit the link in the description for the merch store. As you can see, we have a bunch of t-shirts here. As usual, I am wearing one of those t-shirts. As I always say, this is my entire wardrobe, save for 3 or 4 t-shirts. Andy will know every time I see him in Vegas, I'm wearing one of these shirts. So this is all that I wear, and they're affordable t-shirts and high quality. So get one to help support the show. Also, please consider super chats, super stickers. Those are really helpful because YouTube ads pay almost nothing. And we've had great contributions recently from Slew, John Sanders, Stuart Griffin, the Can't Meek an Eagle. In the past, we've had Jerem DeGeneron, Kevin Kovac. You guys have been so grateful with the contributions. It's been amazing. So thank you so much. Just really appreciate it. Also, consider buying my books. The third book I wrote is called Jerks of the College Years, where I made fun of people at Penn State. I spent 6 years there, so I had a lot of material to write about. Also, I wrote my second book was How the 2020 MVP Was Stolen, which is an expose I wrote about how Brett Favre tried to sabotage Aaron Rodgers during 2020 when Rodgers won the MVP. So if you're in for a wild story, that's something to read about. So we are joined today, as I said, by Andy Iskoe. Andy, how are you? And if you want to, give a brief introduction about yourself for those who don't know you.
Sure, Walter. It's always great to join you and chat football, especially during the season when there's actually some actionable information we can take advantage of. But I've been here in Las Vegas since 1991, so I guess I'm pretty much a local right now, and I've been doing professional handicapping, publishing, newsletters, books for a period of time since the mid-1980s. So probably I've been doing it about as long as you've been alive. Maybe even a little longer, I guess. But nonetheless, it's always been a passion of mine, and I was happy to find something that I was good at and that I really enjoyed, because I've always been someone who's been sort of a cerebral bent, and I've always enjoyed the intellectual or mental challenges, and certainly handicapping sports provides those challenges all the time, and with basically immediate feedback within hours, usually, of the start of contests.
Yeah, I always love having you on, Andy. Thank you so much for joining us. Always, it's great to have you on as a guest, always, because you always provide such great information, and all the readers have nothing but good things to say about our episodes with you. Although Lamont said, "Where's Jacob at?" Jacob is no longer doing the show. Lamont, sorry to break the news to you, but yeah, we have Andy on, so Andy's a great guest here. Chris says Jacob is locked in Quacky sex dungeon. I can assure you that he's not.
That sounds like an interesting story.
Yes,
we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe my fourth book will be about that. Alberto says, I won. I don't know what you won, but congratulations. Andrew says, this man sounds smart. Yes, absolutely.
I'll tell you what, if he won his pick in Survivor this week at the Circa, he's one of less than 1,000 entries that remain alive.
It's unbelievable how many upsets there have been this year. I can't.
Unprecedented.
I can never remember a season like this where no favorite is safe. There's no easy pick, it seems like, and it's
no. If you take a look at the Survivor results for the first few weeks, I mean, not only are teams being eliminated, or entries being eliminated and teams losing, but you're talking about usually 4 or 5 of the top 6 or 7 picks going down. This week it was the top 4 was Cincinnati losing outright, Cleveland losing outright, Tampa Bay and Las Vegas losing outright, and that eliminated, I think it was about maybe close to 3,000 entries. Remember, we started with 14,266, so 14,266,000 payday for the final Survivor, if there will be one, if it goes the entire season, which in the contest, of course, is 20 weeks with the Thanksgiving and Christmas week, for those people who may or may not be familiar with the concept of the Circus Survivor contest. But a lot of these teams are, and some of them are clearly, big favorites, but other than that, modest favorite, that drew a lot of support. So the books are smiling a lot so far for the first 3 weeks of the season. Fortunately, there are 15 weeks left.
Yeah, seriously, the public's been taking a beating with all these big favorites losing. Like Chris says, it's nice. It's Andy. I still always remind myself of the sage advice: no team is ever as bad as they look at their worst, or as good as they look at their best. And I have to keep reminding myself.
Yeah, I've said that. No, I've said that for a long time. And another way of putting it, when two good teams play, one good team is going to lose. And when two bad teams play, one bad team is going to win. And so I say do not automatically downgrade the good team that lost, for example, unless it's a one-sided blowout. And even then, you might make some adjustment. Well, let's say if it's a close game between Georgia and Alabama this week in college football, and Alabama wins, I don't downgrade Georgia simply because they lost the game if they lost a competitive game to one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the country, as was Georgia. Same thing if Kent State plays Akron and Kent State beats Akron. I'm not necessarily going to upgrade Kent State because they beat maybe team number 130 out of the 134 FBS teams. So team is, I wouldn't say never. I sort of modified it because I don't like using the words always and never, even though I'm guilty of it on occasion. So I'd say a team rarely plays at its best, looks as good when it plays its best, or as bad. It is as bad as it looks when it plays its worst. But the thing there is that it's sort of related to the old advice. Don't overreact to what you just saw. You don't want to overreact, but you also don't want to fail to react. Every result draws some reaction. It's just a question of how much you weight that reaction. How much emphasis do you put on the reaction, or do you just shrug it off and say it was, just a fluky game? It's one of those where if these teams play 10 times, this other team wins 9 out of 10, and the game they saw yesterday happened to be that 10th game.
Yeah, it's something that you can even translate it just to real numbers. Teams coming off losses of 30 or more in the NFL are 55% against the spread.
Yeah.
So they tend to bounce back, and as Chris said, I have to remind myself watching the Jaguars Monday. However, the caveat to that, and we'll get to this game later in a bit. That the Texans are also coming off a blowout loss. So,
by the way, one other thing along these lines is that when you use statistics, remember that statistics, for the most part, depending on how you use them, are averages. A team rarely plays an average game. The average is the average of the games that they play better than the average and the games that they play worse than the average. So normally what I try to do is, okay, based upon how this team has played and the current situation, the opponent, are they likely to play better than their established average performance or worse than their average performance? So numbers are a guideline, but they're not the Bible.
That's absolutely true. It's great advice. Matthias saying, any stories this week on people missing out on 50K plus because Singletary slid before the touchdown? Well, I can tell you a story about my friend Mike, who lost $960,000 on DraftKings in the $1 million contest because the Chiefs blocked a 2-point conversion, or no, they blocked an extra point and returned it for 2. He was in first place, winning $1 million, and that was the last game still on the slate. This is back in 2000 and in 2020, I believe. And he dropped the third place because both second and third had Chiefs defense, and instead of winning $1 million, he won $40,000. And I interviewed him on the show actually, and he said, "You know what? It's still $40,000 I didn't have before the contest." So it's a good way of looking at it, but still.
And it also makes for a good story to tell years and years from now. Yep. You'll probably be able to laugh a little bit more about it, but yes, like you said, he's got $40,000 out of it.
Yeah, it's still feels bad, but yeah, maybe he can write a book too. Andrew says Jacob got fired by Walt. That is absolutely not true. Jacob was great. I wish he could still be in the show. Jacob had to step down, unfortunately, but I did not fire Jacob. It was an easy pick in Survivor until Bryce Young got benched. That's absolutely true.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll tell you the story because I was planning on using the Raiders this past week on the expectation that they were going to start the season 0-2, having lost at Baltimore. Once they lost at Baltimore, I lost all interest in wondering how they were going to bounce back after what could have been a letdown situation for the Raiders, getting an unexpected win, especially the way they won it in the last 4 or 5 minutes of that game. And then, of course, a day or two later comes out the word that Bryce Young's benched in favor of Andy Dalton, which just added even more uncertainty to the contest between the the Raiders and the Panthers. And as you and I talked about before the show, and I may as well share, with our listeners and viewers, is that for me, the two most impressive teams this week were the Washington Commanders and the Carolina Panthers. Not that they won or pulled, upsets, but just if you watched that game, the way that both offense and defenses on those two teams played like they were Super Bowl contenders. They were not taking plays off. They hit hard. Now, would it be reasonable to say that perhaps we saw the best performance out of Washington and Carolina this past weekend that we'll see all season? Not unreasonable, but it does at least show you that they do have NFL talent.
Yeah, that's definitely true, because it didn't look like they did for a while, but now we've seen proof of that. All right, so Ron asking, is this Sam Darnold's the first time you ever had a 3-game winning streak in his life? Well, I mean, he did play well in college.
I was going to say elementary school he did.
right, exactly. All right, let's get to the games. The Thursday game is Cowboys and Giants. We both play in the Super Contest. I imagine we're not going to have this on our card because, you have to submit your Super Contest entry early. However, maybe I shouldn't assume. Maybe you love one of these sides. I personally like the like the Cowboys here. My rule for Thursday Night Football is that if there is a clear superior team, then you take them if you think they're going to be focused, because the inferior team doesn't have time to prepare for these sort of games. So if it was a full week, then they would. But the Giants, I don't think they can really prepare for what Dallas can bring, which is the pass rush. They've had immense trouble protecting Daniel Jones in these matchups. So I think that's going to continue. I know the Giants have looked better recently. They beat the Browns, but I think the Browns are actually horrible. So I don't really look much into that. And we saw Dallas have their way with the Browns much easier than the Giants did. So this line,
except for the Giants' ability to sack the quarterback against Cleveland.
Yeah,
I think they are. I think they're tied for second, averaging 4.7 sacks per game through 3 games. So that's impressive. As far as Dallas goes. And, my thoughts there is I still have questions about that Dallas running game, but my questions now are more with the Dallas defense. Who was the defensive coordinator last year?
Yeah, well, he's
where is he now?
Yeah, he's in Washington. So
yeah, and we've seen a precipitous fall off in Dallas's defense. Really, the first game against Cleveland they played decently, but the thing is that the concern I have about backing Dallas. That doesn't mean I'm going to back the Giants, probably pass the game, but when you have a team that gets dominated the way Dallas did against New Orleans, you would expect the following week, especially playing at home, especially against a good team, but and against any foe, you would have expected a better effort than the Cowboys put in for the first 3 quarters plus of that game against Baltimore. For them losing that game to Baltimore would have been no shame. The fact that they were basically non-competitive until the game was pretty much, although not entirely, out of reach, that's a little bit of a concern, and you have to wonder, now they're going out on the road playing a team that off back-to-back wins, even though that win against Washington was rather ugly, but that was due to their lack of a kicker, that they're facing a team playing at home with a great deal of confidence going in there. And, by the way, playing to avenge some ugly losses from last year to the Cowboys.
Yeah, it's just been one-sided here with the Dallas pass rush, but you're right about the Giants pass rush. It seems like that's something they didn't have last year. They did have Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence, but now they have Brian Burns, and Dallas lost a couple of offensive linemen this offseason. Tyler Guyton is their first-round pick. It's been terrible. So my question to you is, you said you're going to pass in the game, but using my rule, do you think Dallas is definitely the better team here, or do you think they're a lot closer than I make them out to be?
I think they're the more talented team. I think you go position by position. Dallas, if you take a look at the 22 positions, the 24 positions, if you include punter and place kicker, Dallas probably maybe 16-8 advantage if you go position by position. But it's the mental part of the Dallas Cowboys that I'm a little bit concerned about. In fact, I always have a discussion with a friend about Dallas and their playoff failures recently. Well, a little more than recently, and that's Dak Prescott gets them to the playoffs, and Mike McCarthy coaches them out. So I always have some issues with Mike McCarthy on the sideline. But the reason I'm going to pass the game is I don't like what I've seen out of Dallas. Not so much 2 weeks ago against New Orleans. I mean, that's going to happen every so often. it's how they followed that up in a very favorable situation at home, at least playing. And by the way, apologies for that interruption. I can't mute that part of the little dings coming in there. But the concern is more with the fact that Dallas is the better football team, but the Giants are playing the better football right now.
I actually don't hear those things, so
that's good.
I don't know if that's coming through.
That's good.
So Ron is bringing up a point here. It says Cowboys were tight against Baltimore. The Cowboys tend to choke against good teams, and I think that may have been the case last week where they were playing too tight. They were just in way over their heads, and these are the sort of games they won under Mike McCarthy. Like they beat up on the bad teams. And if you still consider the Giants a bad team, I think that Dallas is definitely the play for me because especially we're looking at the look-ahead lines before week 3. Dallas was -7 at the Giants, and I even like that. And now this line's 5.5. It was 4.5. Now it's up to 5.5. I just think there's some value with Dallas just because of that blowout loss to Baltimore.
Yeah, it's just a question of how Daboll can inspire his team, considering they lost 40 to nothing in the opener last year and 49-7 in the rematch. And these guys are athletes; they have pride. They know they were embarrassed twice, and they also know that right now Dallas is in perhaps its most vulnerable spot that it'll be in all season as far as the way that they're playing, and that has a lot to do with it. But and again, I am concerned about the Dallas's running game. Again, those are the reasons why I'm passing the game, because I'm conflicted. Do I play what ostensibly is the better team, or do I play the team that right now, at least based upon the two of the 3 weeks we've seen, is playing the better football?
Mm-hmm. Andrew says, I don't understand why McCarthy was establishing the run against the Ravens. Their pass defense is much worse. It's true. Enrico Dowdle isn't Emmitt Smith. That is that's certainly true.
Few are.
Yes, that's definitely, yeah, absolutely. Bland had 5 pick 6 last year. Might return week 8 for Dallas, says Barons. And then Illuminor has been okay for the Giants. Evan Neal was a free sack last year. Yeah, the offensive line's a little bit better. They have Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors, by the way, is just amazing.
Yeah.
These teams are closer than they were last year, but I still think Dallas is the better team. So I will be on Dallas here. Let's move on.
But not in the contest.
No. Andy, I can tell you I'm not submitting this early.
No, that's for those people who may be listening and do have entries in the contest. The reason I tell people, because I proxy for a lot of folks in the contest, and I'll often give them, having done it for so many years. Originally there was only just the Super Contest, that was the Hilton, then the West, and now the Westgate. Every year since 1991, so I've had a lot of experience in doing these contests. And the reason I tell people is don't play the Thursday night game. No matter how much you love the Thursday night game, having the extra 24 to 36 hours to fill out your card, you may spot something on Friday that you wish you had played if you hadn't because you got to put all selections in at once. So you might spot something as you're reviewing it again on Friday or Saturday morning that I'd rather concede the possibility of what I think is an easy win. There are no such things. I mean, just take a look at the first 3 weeks of this season. But I'd rather risk giving up what could be that kind of win for feeling confident in all 5 picks.
Yeah, I think the only time I submit early, yeah, exactly, Thanksgiving, because not only do you have the 3 games on Thursday night, you now have the Black Friday game. Yeah. So you have 4 games to choose from. So my thinking is if I love 3 games between Thursday and Friday, then I will submit it early. Otherwise, if it's only 2, I don't think I would.
And usually the Thanksgiving matchups are, at least prior to the season, in most cases, expected to be competitive matchups, except for, I guess, Dallas. They always like to pair them with one of their NFC East rivals, and for the most part, the NFC East, other than Philadelphia in recent years, has not been that strong. What was it, the one year that Washington won the division? What were they, like 8-7-1 or something like that, 9-7 maybe?
Yeah,
maybe 7-9, something
like
that.
It's always Washington at Dallas, New York at Dallas. It seems like they rotate every year. Sometimes it's often like Raiders at Cowboys for some reason.
Yeah, Detroit also has always been a bad team up until recently, and they got to host one of the Thanksgiving games. So it's tough to find 3 competitive games. Usually the Thursday night game is the marquee game, because if the season plays out relatively close to expectations, you're talking now week 12, 13, 14 by Thanksgiving, you're talking about 2 teams that are competing for either a division title or a wild card facing each other on Thanksgiving night.
Yeah, I don't know who the Thursday. Do you know offhand who that is?
Is it Pittsburgh and Baltimore? Maybe.
Pittsburgh sounds right. I mean,
Or
that
maybe
doesn't
it's
matter now.
Pittsburgh, or is it the Green Bay Miami one? Let me check.
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't. We can look later. So let's get to the Saints at Falcons game. This line is Falcons -1.5. Both teams suffered offensive line injuries last week. The Saints lost Eric McCoy on the first drive, and their offense wasn't the same after being so explosive the first 2 weeks. The Falcons looked great in the first quarter, and then they lost Caleb McGarry and Drew Dalman in the second quarter, and their offense fell apart until the end when they're moving the ball, and then I don't know why they passed on the field goal on the penultimate drive, because they could have just kicked the field goal again on the next drive and won the game. So coaching comes into play there. Any thoughts on this game, Andy? I currently don't have a bet place for this, but I am open to any consideration. So
Yeah, I will say overall that I'm not overly thrilled about this week. It's got nothing to do with the way the first 3 weeks went, because I've actually done okay the first 3 weeks. It's just the matchups this week are not as attractive in great extent to what we had before. This, had everybody been healthy, this would have been a very attractive matchup, because clearly New Orleans has played better than expected in the first 3 weeks of the season, and Atlanta was expected to play well, but they were an unknown. I think the season win total was 9 or 9.5, so there were great expectations, but we didn't really know. And I think their season turned on that game with Kirk Cousins leading that last-minute drive, and that basically gave the team in the feel of, hey, we are a young team, and we've got a veteran leader that we can feel comfortable in, and look what he did in that game against the Eagles. And I think that may turn around to be the turning point. And then you even go back to week 1, their loss at home to Pittsburgh. Well, Pittsburgh's unbeaten this year with an outstanding defense. So in retrospect, maybe the loss that Atlanta had in week 1 doesn't look as bad as it may have right after that game. So as far as this one is concerned, I'm not sure I would play the game because of those key injuries, but the side I'm looking first towards is Atlanta.
Okay, interesting. I was leaning toward the Saints just because Atlanta has 2 offensive line injuries, whereas the Saints have 1. They're both down their centers, but I think it's easier to game plan.
Well, by the way, I've also been impressed with Atlanta's defense.
Oh yeah, Matthew Judon was such a great addition. When we met in Las Vegas in July, I thought Atlanta was one of the most overrated teams in the NFL, just because they signed Kirk Cousins, but I was very critical of their defense. But then they added Justin Simmons. Then they traded for Matthew Judon. I think those are 2 amazing additions. So this is a completely different team than I thought they would be.
I was with you in in all 3 of those assessments. Yeah.
Yeah, so Chris pointing out the Saints have won 10 of 13 here, including a massive blowout last year, 48-17. The Saints have had the edge in this matchup, and I think being down only 1 lineman compared to 2, I think that gives them an edge. If you look at the EPA numbers now, it's still early in the season. It's only 3 weeks, so take this with a grain of salt. You just look at the EPA. The Saints should be favored by 6.5, which I don't necessarily agree with, but it's kind of staggering how the metrics view this matchup. I don't really have a good feel for this game. I will not be playing it.
I actually do have the Saints favored in this game. So if I went strictly by the numbers, I should be on the Saints. But it's just something let's see if Kamara can keep up the performance that he's had early on.
Yeah, we'll see. He's been amazing. He was amazing the first 2 weeks. He kind of took a step backward last week, and he seems like a guy who gets worn down a lot. So I've been, not that anyone's interested in best ball, but I've been drafting Jamal Williams a lot in the very late rounds of best ball. So maybe he'll get some starts. Let's go to the next game. Hopefully we'll have a play here. Steelers at the Colts. Feels like the Steelers always play at the Colts. I don't know, every year. Maybe it's just me, but usually the Steelers win these games. Actually, it says the Steelers are favored by 2. I don't think that's... Yeah, the Steelers are favored by 2.
Yeah.
They're 3-0. The Colts, they've kind of disappointed. I thought they would be a dark horse to make the playoffs, but they've had so many injuries. DeForest Buckner has been out. They're missing their top cornerback. Their other defensive linemen have been banged up. And Anthony Richardson, his accuracy is just all over the place. He throws some amazing passes, and then he throws something where you're like, oh, what is he doing there? So against Mike Tomlin, that just seems like a disaster waiting to happen. So I'm leaning toward the Steelers right now, but I don't really see any value here with Pittsburgh being a road favorite. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I might end up playing Pittsburgh. And it's I was more enthusiastic, like you suggested you were, about the Colts coming into the season. I did not expect Richardson to be struggling the way that he is, and that's not a good position to be in when you're going up against a defense such as the Steelers have. So, when I look at Pittsburgh has played really solid. I mean, and they've been able to do things on offense. I didn't expect Fields to be able to be in there so quickly, but with the injury to Wilson, I thought Fields would end up being the starting quarterback by sometime in October, and he's been a good fit with this team. They're not asking him to do too much, and he's got a good supporting cast, and again, a great defense, and nothing is going right for Indianapolis early on. I know they're 0-3, and you like to play 0-3 teams against the spread, but not when the spread is under a field goal. And Indianapolis, their best effort, they've regressed really. Their best effort was the opening game against Houston, where they kept coming back every time Houston would score, and they ended up getting the cover because they were getting 2.5 and a 29-27 loss. And then the following week, everybody liked them. What was it? I think against Green Bay, and it was a low-scoring game, but Green Bay, they run the ball? I think 53 times in that game, something like that, which is another story about when we get to that game. And their effort last week against a team that was really struggling, left a lot to be desired. So for me, it's either Pittsburgh or pass, and I'm probably 60-40 leaning on Pittsburgh just because I trust that defense.
That makes sense. Patrick says, made $278 this weekend off making 5 parlays using free bonus bets from Bet365. Not too bad to get free money. Any other sports books with bonus bets offers? Actually, this is on the homepage, Patrick. The link's at the very top of the updates for today. But at bookies.com/WalterFootball, we have all these promos here. So this is new. I've not even seen this. ESPN Bet has a $1,000 bet reset. There's Bet365, as you were saying. FanDuel, Caesars, DraftKings, BetRivers. Sometimes more get added here. But yeah, check this out. Again, the link's on the homepage. But bookies.com/WalterFootball. I always say this, like it's always great to shop around and get these bonus bets because you always get burned on the vig. You have to pay 10% or 8% if you're lucky, or if you have Pinnacle, maybe 5%. But you're always paying something to bet. But if you can counter that with these bonus bets, so definitely shop around for the best line and try to get these bonus bets. I think it's pretty important to build up your bankroll. And something I like to do is like sometimes. Like FanDuel once a month, they'll give out like a $25 bonus bet. I'll just throw it on a Super Bowl team that's like 20-1 and just hope that hits. So let's see here. Seabaz say, how's it going, Walt? Locking any plays yet? No locks yet, but we might get something soon. I think Chris is worrying about the public backing Pittsburgh. There's always been a conspiracy theory there. I don't know if you buy into that, Andy, but whenever the public is backing the Steelers heavily, they tend to not cover. I don't know if you ever bought into that, but
not really. I just think it's a reflection of reacting to what you've just seen, and it's only natural that if a team is playing well or they won a big game, that they're going to get bet the following week, and it's impossible virtually for teams to play at that same level week after week after week. In other words, how long can you sustain a maximum effort? That's why when team goes on 5 or 6 game winning streaks, you've got to take notice because that means they're generally playing their best for an extended period of time, which generally means that team is pretty deep, and they've also been fairly free of significant injuries. But, I could make a case for that if Pittsburgh were, say, laying 6 or 6.5, that maybe they'll do just enough to win. But when you're looking at a line of 1.5, 2 points, that's basically, if you cover the line, it pretty much means you've won the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you've won the game, it pretty much means you've covered the line. Obviously, if you've covered -2.5, you have won the game.
Yeah, Steelers' favorites of more than 3 have always been just bad under Tomlin, but anything less
they've generally not been an explosive offensive team.
Right.
They haven't had to be.
Yeah, Tomlin, I think he says the same thing 3 or 4 times a year in press conferences where he wins like a game by 1 when they've been favored by 6 or 7, and he goes, this is Steeler football. We win ugly. That's just how they do it. So I don't know why people.
The fans love to see him win 35-34. He's happy winning 13-10.
Yep. I mean, a win's a win.
Yep.
Let's see. you can sustain maximum effort for 18 games at least per the 2007 Patriots. Steelers have the best defense since Legion of Boom. I wouldn't put them there yet, but we'll see. It's not like they've played great offenses, like
No.
Justin Herbert was injured last week. I thought that was an easy play for the Steelers. In week 2, they had Bo Nix playing his second game. Week 1 is Kirk Cousins playing his first game with the new team. They're a great defense. I wouldn't put them up with
Well, the thing is that they are consistently a solid, one of the top tier defenses. Not every year, of course, but I'd say 8 out of 10 years they're probably top 12.
Yeah, and Tomlin's a great coach. They have T.J. Watt, Cameron Hayward. They have
He's already 1/3 of the way to guaranteeing a winning season again.
Yeah,
and we're only 3 weeks in.
It's truly remarkable. My father-in-law, by the way, the only bet he makes every year outside of maybe a long shot is Steelers over win totals.
Over, yeah. I used to do that with Andy Reid, both with Philadelphia and Kansas City.
I remember now those lines are inflated, unfortunately. It's tough to do that, but he would always get there for you. All right, Jaguars at the Texans. This line is Texans -6.5. So I like the quote by C.J. Stroud after that loss to Minnesota. He said, it's time to get down to business after that loss. Well, I don't know why they weren't in business against Minnesota, but they were coming off a nationally televised win. So maybe a deflating effort there. That was the first national TV game. So it was, granted, it's against Chicago, but maybe they took it a little too seriously. So they were complete no-show against Minnesota. I love good quarterbacks coming off a loss. It's not just CJ Stroud here, who's, by the way, 5-2 against the spread off a loss. It's a small sample size, but you can look at every quarterback throughout every good quarterback throughout recent history. Joe Burrow, for example, 15-7 against the spread off a loss. Aaron Rodgers, I believe, is like 39-21 against the spread off a loss. Like, if you look at every good quarterback, as long as they're not favored by a huge margin, touchdown or more, they tend to cover. So I think I will be signing with Houston. I hate that Jacksonville's coming off a blowout loss because the spread went from 4.5 on the look ahead to 6.5.
Yeah.
So we lost a little bit of value. However, Jacksonville has been so bad this year. And I know that you can make the case that they could have won their first 2 games. However, they lost to Miami, who got blown out in the next 2 games. Granted, without Tua in the third game, but they still got blown out against Buffalo in week 2. And then they lose to Cleveland, and Cleveland loses to the Giants and gets blown up by Dallas in week 1. And by the way, Dallas.
Both of those games were at home in Cleveland.
Right. So yes, Jacksonville could be 2-1. However, I just don't think they're very good. And Trevor Lawrence, I don't know what's going on with him. He's regressed. He reminds me of Carson Wentz, who regressed under Doug Peterson. So even though this line's inflated, which I hate, I wish Jacksonville kept it close, but I still like Houston to -6.5. What are your thoughts on this game?
No, I'm totally with you. In fact, I like Houston, and I'm glad that their loss was as one-sided as it was, because it's sort of like a little slap on the face, a little water in the face that, hey, wake up, guys. This league is not easy. You can't take any win for granted, any game for granted. And I'm not going to say that Houston took Minnesota for granted, because Minnesota so far has exceeded expectations. And Darnold is showing with some good coaching that you can be a competent NFL quarterback, at least thus far. So if Houston had beaten Minnesota, maybe, I don't know, 24-14, I might not be interested. But the fact that they got humiliated, and it was a short week, and yes, it was a big game that they had played up, the Sunday night game in Houston against the Bears the week before, where they weren't overly impressive but did enough to win. That yes, I'm on Houston this week, but I would not play it above 7.
I actually moved to 7. It was 6.5 earlier today. I agree. I wouldn't play this at 7.5. I think 7 is just like the cutoff point.
It would also be, I think, a good team to use in a 6-team teaser.
Yes, I think so.
Down to a -1 or -0.5, depending on what you can find.
Yeah. Anytime you can get 7, 6, and 3 on the teaser.
By the way, there's another bit of advice if you are considering. If you like to tease favorites down in that 6 to 7 point range, and so you're looking at -0.5 or -1 or pick 'em or something, and you're doing even a more than just 2-team teaser, but even with a 2-team teaser, do the calculation of what the teaser pays versus what a money line parlay would pay, because sometimes there might be a little bit of an edge of doing the money line parlay, depending upon the prices at the time that you play it, versus the teaser, which of course has a fixed odds but of course the points might change. So that's just something to keep an eye on. And more people are doing that rather than just instinctively teasing it down to pick 'em or -0.5. Let me figure out what the money line pays.
You know what? Instead of the money line parlay, you know what I like to do now that a lot of online sports books allow you to make your own line, basically, is instead of parlaying money lines, to parlay -2.5s on the other side. For example, like if you like Jacksonville here, and I don't, but if you like Jacksonville here, instead of taking the money line, take them on Jacksonville -2.5, and parlay that with another underdog at -2.5, and you get such better vig. And like games do land on 1 and 2, but not at a high frequency. So. That's something I like to do, is to take an underdog at -2.5. Yeah, Blake says good info. Yeah, absolutely. Chris says seems early, but any chance the Jaguars quit on Doug Peterson? He might be the worst head coach right now. Pointing figures. Yeah, there could be. This team had high expectations entering the year, and it looks like they're not going to make the playoffs. So they could quit. I don't think players quit long term, but they can quit from time to time. They can quit on a game or two from time to time.
Yeah, I think the seat is very hot, especially with the comments he made earlier today, basically reevaluating everything and wouldn't even commit to the quarterback situation.
I didn't even hear those comments. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Sue says a motivated Texans team has the capability to torch any bad team. Yeah, absolutely. You got to like the matchups here too. Jacksonville can't cover anyone in the secondary. Houston has 3 great receivers. Jacksonville can't pass protect. Houston has great pass rush. It just seems like this is very one-sided. Andrew says Belichick in Jacksonville next year. That would be interesting. Although I don't know.
Or Dallas.
I was surprised Dallas didn't hire him this offseason. Actually, we reported this on the show, but Jerry Jones was considering firing Mike McCarthy. But he was talked out of it by someone. I don't know who. But
Mike McCarthy? Maybe.
Yeah,
maybe he talked him out of it.
Maybe. But the one person that Jerry Jones was planning on interviewing had he fired Mike McCarthy was Jason Witten, who is a high school football coach right now. So I don't know if that's serious, but maybe he wanted to do his friend a favor, put his name out there. But that's something we reported via Charlie's sources. Anyway, you mentioned Sam Darnold. We have Vikings at the Packers.
By the way, I'll be surprised to see if, given the state of Jacksonville and the love of a lot of people and look, it paid off last week, betting the Panthers, betting the Broncos as nice underdogs. How many people will be on Jacksonville this week, as bad as they looked on Monday night?
Yeah, it would be hard to.
Won't be me, but there will be a lot out there.
Yeah. So anyway, we have Vikings at the Packers. I feel like the 2 front runners for head coach of the year right now, Kevin O'Connell and Matt LaFleur here. We don't know the status of Jordan Love yet. He apparently was close to playing last week, although we don't know. I mean, he was limited in practice each week, but that may not mean anything because Jack Conklin was limited in practice in week 1 every day, and he hasn't played yet. So I just don't know what to make of this. I suspect we're going to see Malik Willis for one more game if I had to guess. So right now, Packers are -2.5. I would lean toward Minnesota. I just love fading backup quarterbacks against elite defenses. And Minnesota right now is ranked 3rd in defensive EPA. Brian Flores is just an amazing defensive coordinator, and he can really confuse these green quarterbacks here. And I think that Malik Willis has looked good against 2 inept teams, but this is a step up for him. And I know Minnesota is coming out of the dome where they haven't done as well historically, but they've had wins in Green Bay. So right now I'm leaning toward Minnesota. I just don't know what to do with this quarterbacking situation for Green Bay. What are your thoughts on this game?
I actually like Green Bay. I've been on them. Not week 1 against Philadelphia, the Brazil game, but I was on them in week 2 at at Indianapolis, and last week at Tennessee. And I could understand what you're saying about Flores confusing quarterbacks, but when you're not passing the football because your running game is so effective, that becomes less of a concern. And Green Bay's had great success in running the football in their first 3 games, and they're not asking Willis to do too much. I was also, don't know how much it played, but the fact that Willis probably knew a lot about the Tennessee Titan team that his new Packers were going to play this past week, that might have had some intel that he was able to provide to them. But they are playing 1960s football. They're playing Vince Lombardi football: run again, and then either punt or score, depending on what you do. So I like the way the Packers are playing. I like the fact that, it is important to win division games at home. I would not be surprised if Minnesota wins, but at under a field goal, I prefer taking Green Bay, even though I do know that 2.5-point road underdogs have done very well straight up in the last 10 years.
Interesting. Yeah, you're right. They may not have to throw, especially with Willis running just so well. Like, he looks like Michael Vick out there with these past couple of games. It's been unbelievable. Blake says Aaron Jones revenge game. Green Bay has been stellar against the run, surprisingly. Historically, they've been so bad against the run this year, but they're actually 5th in run defense. Minnesota, by the way, 6th in run defense. So I think that Packer rushing attack might be tested, but so far they've run on everyone, and they ran on Tennessee last week.
By the way, excuse me one moment, because the one thing when I hear a stat like that, I always like to check the context, and I don't have that in front of me. But you say Minnesota is 5th against the run and the Green Bay is 4th or something like that. What I want to know is, especially in the case of Green Bay, are they so highly ranked against the run because other teams don't have the ball, don't possess the ball as long, because the Packer running game controls clock? Same thing with Minnesota. Not to the same extent, of course, but that's one thing. In other words, when you say rated highly on defense, how much does that have to do with the fact that the other team just doesn't get the opportunity to run as much, so they're not going to gain as many yards?
Right. It's when I say these rankings,
it's a DVO type thing.
Yeah, it's EPA, not yardage. But if you could look at the Week 2 game, for example, with Green Bay against the Colts, Jonathan Taylor could not run at all against them, and then the week after he runs all over the Bears. Minnesota has handled the run pretty well too. So Green Bay's running game will be tested, but they have the offensive line to get there. And Josh Jacobs was great until last week, and then Emmanuel Wilson came out of nowhere, and it was phenomenal for them. Plus, like I said, Malik Willis changes everything with his rushing ability. So this is an interesting game. If Jordan Love returns and the Packers are favored by more than 3, I would assume maybe they're 3.5 or -4. What does that change your opinion on this game?
By the way, the other thing that Green Bay does, it's against a small side. They are very good at not turning the football over. That's something that Minnesota's done a few more times this year also. That I think also leads to their success. If I'm LaFleur, you said you expect Willis to start one more week. I might consider that, unless they fall behind and really need Love. If they're able to execute their running game as effectively as they can the last 2 games, why not just continue to go with it as long as it's working and you're not exposing Love to potential injury because he's not really needed as much. Now, of course, if the Vikings are up 14-0, that becomes a different story. But at the start of the game, maybe you just go with what's been working for you.
Yeah, Chris says if Love returns, I think the Vikings would be very appealing at +3.5 or +4. I agree. If he returns early, he may not be 100%. Yeah,
and the Packers might not think they need to run as much with Love back.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that could be a trap for them. I'm on the same thought process as Chris there. All right, next game we have the cat fight of the week: Bengals at the Panthers. I was actually on the phone with Tom on Friday, and he was he was pretty tired, and so he was. I don't know why he's kind of laughing that there was a cat fight this week. I don't know why, but anyway, so we talked about this before. I guess before we start recording, Joe Burrow coming off a loss, like I said early in the show, 15-7 against spread following the defeat. He's not done well as a huge favorite, but they're only -4.5 here. The advanced spread was 7. So we're getting good line value. I know Andy Dalton playing is baked into that. However, I think that Cincinnati, just with their backs against the wall here, 0-3, this is a must-win for them. They can't possibly look past Carolina. And Carolina,
they couldn't possibly look past Washington.
So this is something
or New England.
Right. This is something I brought up last week, and I did not like the Bengals for this reason. And I didn't have a word for this or a phrase for this. I called it the ladder theory, and someone called it. I think Chris Fluke in the chat called it a. And I can't even remember. If Chris, you're listening, please let me know what you called it. But this tends to happen a lot, where an underdog in a big game plays its heart out. For example, week 2 this season, the Bengals played their hearts out against the Chiefs as big underdogs, and they lost. And then the next week, they were huge favorites. I found that teams in the situation have issues, major problems covering and like playing very well. Like
we're not talking about covering. Well, I'm talking about winning the game. If they beat Washington by 2, they don't cover, but they're not 0-3.
Right. This actually happened last year. Jacksonville in week 2, they played Kansas City. They played them very tough for a while. Kansas City pulled away, and then the next week they were 9-point favorites against Houston. They lost outright as well. So this
now, by the way, at that time we didn't know how good a team Houston was. It was just C.J. Stroud's 3rd game.
You're right. However, Houston was coming off 2 blowout losses themselves, including a blowout loss to the Colts in week 2. So I don't know, like they weren't quite there yet, So I think that the Bengals just took last Monday night's game for granted. They played a tough game against the Chiefs. Like, okay, we can beat Washington.
Well, how much of that? Let's say relaxing, and they go right down the field on that first possession and score. Yeah. They're doing exactly what they wanted to, get up 7-0. Unfortunately, the defense couldn't. No problem with the offense last night. It was all the defense could not make a stop. I mean, what they say, it was the first game in the NFL since 1940. So we're talking 84 years that featured neither a punt nor a turnover.
Wow, that's
amazing. So it wasn't the defense, and it was mostly Cincinnati's defense because they scored some late points to make the score close.
Yeah. I think they, at least some of the players took the game for granted. I just don't think they were trying very hard, just because I think they looked at Washington and said, okay, we can beat Washington here. But now they absolutely have to win this game. And like I said, Joe Burrow coming off a loss, any good quarterback off the loss that's not favored by a lot, I have immense interest in. So I'm on the Bengals. I get the sense that you like Carolina. Who do you like?
No, I can't play this game because I don't know how Carolina responds. They're 2-15 last year, and they start this year looking like they could be 0-17. And everybody, they're the butt of all the jokes, and nobody likes Bryce Young at quarterback because he's ineffective and all that. All of a sudden, they go out and play if you had told me those were the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Raiders this past Sunday, I would have said, yeah, good game by Mahomes. I mean, this team was hitting hard on defense. They were not allowing anything to attack them on offense. And the Raiders aren't they're a 7-10 team possibly. But what the Panthers did, that can do an awful lot for your confidence. I mean, when you're losing week after week, you don't really look forward to coming in on Wednesday or Tuesday, whatever day, depending upon when you play the game, and getting into work. We got to go through all this for another loss on Sunday. Now all of a sudden, it'd be different if Carolina won this game even 21-17 on a late touchdown or something. They were in control of that game basically in the middle of the or late first quarter on. And sometimes that, because remember, these are all the best football players in the world, and sometimes you just don't get the proper coaching or the proper technique situations. And the best example I always use is Steve Young, Hall of Fame quarterback. Didn't get anything done in Tampa Bay, goes to San Francisco, backs up Joe Montana, takes over for Joe Montana when he retires, and gets traded to Kansas City, and goes to the Hall of Fame. So sometimes players don't benefit from the situation they're in, and then all of a sudden they realize that or something happens to them, and they can play this game pretty well. So that's what's keeping me up. I will learn something probably more about Carolina this week than I will learn about Cincinnati, because I already know Cincinnati is an underachieving team, and a lot of it has to do with the defense. You could write off the injuries the first, with no T. Higgins the first couple of weeks, because that basically changed what the defense is able to do with only Chase to be terribly concerned about. Carolina, if they go back to being to the same old Carolina team that they were in weeks 1 and 2 and all of last year, and that they get blown out 37-13 by Cincinnati, same old Panthers. But if they take this game down to the wire, or maybe even pull the upset, I was very high on the Washington Commanders coming into this season. I thought they would be a much improved team. I was on Cincinnati last night because I didn't expect Washington's improvement to show up so soon with a rookie quarterback making his second start on the road. Now, Daniels, I think, is going to be a fine quarterback, and I figured that they would improve. Now, I haven't been correct thus far on thinking Chicago was going to improve as the course of the season goes. They may have actually regressed from week 1, although Williams did have some decent passing stats the other day in the loss. But that's the thing with Carolina is I want to see how they react. So I can't play on or against. I suppose if I had to make a play on the game, I'd lay the 4.5 with Cincinnati, only because they are, based on history, the more talented team. But it's kind of like the same thing with Dallas and the Giants. You got a team that's playing well against a team that's not, and there's a very fine line in the talent between Team 1 and Team 32 in most instances, not always, but that's why you don't see lines like you see in college football with 20, 30, 40-point spreads. You rarely see a 14-point spread in the NFL. That's a team is absolutely horrible because the talent is spread so widely around the league that just a couple of players often makes a difference, and sometimes a couple of plays can turn a team around based upon what the expectations were. So I'm passing this one, but I agree Cincinnati should win this one. They have the talent to win, but maybe Carolina can see what a team like Washington saw in Cincinnati's vulnerable defense.
Yeah. Let's see here. Andrew says Bengals overlooked the Commanders' offense. Just look at Cam Taylor-Britt's comments. Yeah, he was saying that he is criticizing Cliff Kingsbury.
He's eating a paperback book today, I think is the analogous to the quote. He can eat his words, he said. Yes.
That's absolutely true. First and Goal with the super chat. Thank you so much, First and Goal, with the 279 super chat. Shout out to my buddy Nick Gurr. Thanks, Walt. Thank you so much, First and Goal. We really appreciate it. All right, let's get to the next game. It is Rams at the Bears. Rams had that amazing comeback, which I didn't see coming. They looked like a complete one-sided affair against the 49ers, and then Trent Williams gets hurt. He comes back, but doesn't look 100%, and so the Rams get this comeback. Against the Bears, you said, Caleb Williams had some good stats last week, but looked very shaky. Don't really know what to make of them. I think what we do know here is that there is a colossal coaching mismatch here with Sean McVay going against Matt Eberflus, who I don't know what he was thinking at that goal line. First of all, that goal line effort last week where they ran the ball 4 times when they drafted 2 players in their passing game in the top 10 of the draft, but they decided to run with DeAndre Swift nonstop. That didn't work. And then he decides to onside kick it. And with 1 timeout left, doesn't get the ball back, of course, when they can't stop the run. I don't know what they're doing here. So the Rams are so banged up. Their defense is just a train wreck. They can't stop Juwan Jennings, so how they could contain DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. I think if you look at the matchups on paper, I think it favors the Bears. However, I don't know, Eberflus a favorite against McVay just seems wrong to me. I can't make sense of this game. Do you like either side?
No, that's why I said at the start that this is a very, I said ugly week, but I guess I could have said challenging week because there are a lot of either teams I like to play on, like Minnesota, Green Bay. I like both of those teams, and teams that I like to play against, like here. I mean, I normally I would like to take the Rams, but they're depleted. They had that great comeback against San Francisco. Now they are stepping down in class here, going against the Bears, and you do have to wonder why the Bears are favored. I mean, why not at the very least make this game a pick 'em and make the public decide who they think is the better team? I think we know that. Well, certainly when healthy, the Rams are the much better team, but they're not healthy. And I was on the Rams plus the 7.5 last week, and it was mostly a play against San Francisco, only because I was wondering how Purdy would perform without Samuel, without McCaffrey, without Kittle, and he did just fine. Jennings filled in very nicely, so maybe that's not as much of a concern as I had made it out to be, and it can only get a little bit better, and we'll talk about that game a little bit later. So I have to pass this game. Again, it's almost like if you made me play Cincinnati, Carolina, I'd lay the short points with Cincinnati. If you made me play this one, I would take the field goal with the Rams.
Blake says Bears should be favored, so take the Bears. Do you think?
That's the it don't make sense theory. Which there's a lot of validity to that. It's like, what am I missing by making the Bears favored?
I mean, sometimes sportsbooks take a side. Do you think the sportsbooks are goading the public into taking the Rams here after that comeback?
I don't really think so, because I don't think that, especially the Bears, and to a lesser extent the Rams, I don't think they're really like public teams that the public gets all excited to bet unless they're playing, one of the elite teams or one of the terrible teams.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I like when I saw this line, I'm like, man, the sportsbooks really want you to take the Rams here because that comeback.
Well, the line opened, I believe, at 2.5, which was still a little high. Like I said, I would have opened the line. I actually I would have made the Rams 2-point road favorites.
Yeah,
make you think.
Yeah, I guess I don't like.
Do you want to go with the experience of the Rams, or do you want to go with the potential? So far undelivered potential of the Bears?
My thinking is, just taking out the first game because they were a lot healthier then. Like they were destroyed at Arizona. Like that was a horrible game. And then for the first half against the Niners until Trent Williams gets hurt, they weren't competitive at all. And the Bears have talent. They have those receivers. They have a decent defense. Caleb Williams has a lot of potential. We haven't seen it yet, but he does. I feel like the
That's
Bears could
coaching.
put it. Yeah, I feel like they could put it together.
Remember, their offensive coordinator who worked with Fields is now the offensive coordinator with the Raiders, so they're starting over at square zero.
Yeah.
Quarterback and coordinator.
Yes. Yeah, I just I can't, like I said, I can't make sense of this game. Andrew with the 499 super chat. Thank you so much, Andrew. Just really, really appreciate it. Bears, he says, Bears will be better away from home this season. Attempting 50 passes won't work in the windy city as it gets colder. Well, we'll see. I could see them being better in the dome. I mean, the strength of that offense is throwing the ball with the receivers they have. Keenan Allen hasn't even played really yet. And they can't run the ball at all. DeAndre Swift is, I think, the worst starting running back in the NFL right now. He just, his legs die after contact. I think he's the worst yards per carry after contact in the NFL at the moment. And the success rate is the lowest too. So I think this might be a Miles Sanders situation last year where Sanders started for Carolina for a few games, and then they eventually decided that Chuba Hubbard was better. I think the Bears are going to turn to Roshan Johnson or Khalil Herbert over DeAndre Swift. I think his days are numbered there. But yeah, thank you again. Thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate it. He says Chicago media has been saying Caleb played a good game against Indy, so maybe Indy thinks the Bears are good. He did not play a good game. He had some good moments, but he did not play a good game overall for sure. Chris asking, speaking Swift, would you stash Roshan? I've been drafting Roshan in best ball drafts, so yeah, I like Roshan. I think he's the best, at least receiving back they have. Herbert might be the better runner, so I think that'll be a split. So I would consider stashing one of those guys. Anyway, next game we have Broncos at the Jets. This line was Jets minus 8.5, dropped all the way to 7. Denver had that impressive 26-7 win in Tampa. The Jets finally got on the board here with a blowout win against the Patriots. Tough spot here for the Jets because they're coming off a divisional win, and next week they have to fly to London to play the Vikings. And generally high favorites. They've struggled heading into London. I have the stat right here. Favorites, it's not a great sample size, but favorites of 4 or more going into London, 12-18 against the spread. They just tend to not focus with the travel overseas ahead of them. And Denver has gotten better each week with Bo Nix. And the Jets can't really defend the run. And I think Denver might have success on the ground. Bo Nix, Tyler Bidet, he changed his name pronunciation. He looked, I thought, pretty good at the end of the Tampa Bay game. Now, maybe it was garbage time, but I thought that maybe they're going to get him the ball more. So the Jets' run defense could be exposed a little bit here. I like Denver quite a bit. I just think the Jets are going to be unfocused, and they're not quite clicking yet. Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers not on the same page. I think that could really hurt them here, especially against Patrick Surtain. Any thoughts on this game, Andy?
No, I also like Denver getting 7 or more. So right now it's 7.5. You might be able to find an 8 at some places. So I do like Denver in this spot. I do agree with the comment you made that they've shown improvement each week with Bo Nix, and that's what you like to see out of a rookie quarterback. Same thing you've seen it with Daniels of Washington, get a little bit better each week, and it paid off with a big win, much like the improvement paid off for Denver the other day in Tampa Bay. I don't know that I would make a money line play on them because I do think the Jets are good enough and can do enough to at least get the win, but I think Denver keeps it competitive. It might actually be, and again, it depends a lot on the timing of the quarterbacks and the receivers. We might see a higher scoring game than would generally be expected, depending upon what the weather is like. But yes, Denver will almost certainly be one of my contest picks, and certainly not out of pocket money play.
Nice. Yeah, we're on the same page there. I think right now, if I had to submit a contest card, they would be on it. Andrew says you're forgetting Nathaniel Hackett revenge factor. Well, that was last year. He got the revenge last year when the Jets played at Denver. Remember, that was the game where they announced Breece Hall would be unshackled because they had him on the wraps coming off the torn ACL, and then he went nuts. So Sue says downside to back-to-back East Coast road games for Denver. I don't know if they're staying out on the East Coast. I haven't read that, but generally teams now stay out on whatever coast the opposite is.
I think the Chargers did that in their games with Carolina and Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, if Herbert were healthy, maybe that would have gone differently. So,
Yeah,
yeah. So
didn't
that
affect the
generally,
result of the game, but yeah.
yeah, that generally has favorite teams. There's kind of like,
Well, remember that's 2 needless days of travel if
right,
you're going back and forth. You know, when you leave
exactly.
the East Coast and you return to the East Coast in a short period of time, that means that's 2 less days of watching film or preparation or however long the flights take. So there are some tangible advantages to staying on either coast for 2 straight weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely don't want to travel back and forth like that. Chris says now it's about Zach Wilson getting revenge on the sideline. Yeah, and Ron says, "What about revenge of the former janitor for the Jets? He used to live in Colorado." Yeah. A lot of revenge here. So I'm glad we're on the same side on that one. The last early game, Eagles at the Buccaneers. Eagles are favored by 2.5. There are so many injuries here. Just don't know what to make of this game yet because the Eagles still didn't have A.J. Brown last week. It sounds like he might be out for one more game, but maybe they'll rush him back because Devontae Smith is on a concussion protocol. Lane Johnson left last week's game with an injury. On Tampa side, Vita Vea was out, but that was only expected to be 1 week, so maybe he would be back. Antoine Winfield missed the past 2 games. So on the Eagles' offensive side of the ball, there are just so many question marks. I suspect that they may not have either receiver or Lane Johnson, and the Bucs will at least get Vea back. I don't know about Winfield, so that's my lean right now. If so, I like Tampa here. Just I feel like they were last week coming off that revenge game against the Lions. I think they also took Denver for granted, kind of like Houston did with Minnesota. They just were a no-show. They thought they'd beat the Broncos easily, and they didn't. And they're going to take the Eagles seriously. Whereas the Eagles, they won last week, but I kind of wonder if that would have been the case had Eric McCoy not got hurt for the Saints. So right now I'm on Tampa, but at 2.5, just not very appealing. This went to 3. Maybe I like it, but there might be a lot of line movement based on the injuries. So what are your thoughts on this one? Because I can't really make sense of it right now.
I've gone back and forth on this one. Philadelphia has a bye next week.
Mm-hmm.
So they may rest A.J. Brown and Smith for that extra week because that's like 2 weeks of rest now that they'll be getting. Actually, 3 weeks. And, Smith did play a little bit this week against New Orleans. So Philadelphia got a much-needed win. Of course, they did open, with 3 of their first 4 games on the road, including this one. Tampa Bay, this is the end of what? I think a 3-game – no, it's what I have on Tampa Bay. Oh, they play their next 2 games on the road against division rivals. They are at Atlanta and at New Orleans. So this becomes a very important game to win because it's unlikely that they would sweep the 2 games at Atlanta and New Orleans. And they are getting a weakened Philadelphia team that managed not to do a heck of a lot offensively last week, but the defense played decently. And Tampa Bay, again, they got that revenge against Detroit the week before, so it was sort of a flat spot for them, especially with Philadelphia. Philadelphia is now in the revenge situation with the playoff loss last year to Tampa Bay, where they were basically a no-show in that game. So I've gone back and forth on this game, so I probably won't be playing it.
Okay. Do you hear me, by the way?
What's that?
Do you hear me, by the way? Just my screen froze here, but
I know I'm hearing you now. I don't know if you said anything while I was speaking, though.
Oh no, I didn't. Yeah. So okay, I don't know why my screen froze here, but you're forgetting Devin White revenge. Yeah, there are a lot of revenge games going on here. Of course, this was a revenge game for the Eagles. I don't really buy into that. I only buy into revenge when one team I know is like not going to be focused. For example, if they're a huge favorite, I think a good case for that would be Tampa at Detroit in week 2, where the Lions are coming off a big win overtime game in week 1, and they were hosting Tampa, and they were a huge favorite, and Tampa wanted revenge, whereas I think the Lions just weren't focused. So I think that was a good case for revenge. But here, Tampa's coming off a blowout loss. I don't think that they're going to overlook the Eagles. So I really don't think revenge plays a factor here at all for them.
It's hard to say because, remember, playoff revenge means they ended your season last year. They ended your Super Bowl hopes.
Right. Yeah.
Now, of course, Philadelphia was basically asking to be eliminated the way they played over the latter part of the season. And that was a big win for them against New Orleans because everyone was finger pointing about the way they blew the Atlanta game and everything. So this could be a spot, for Philadelphia to exhale as well. So you've got those 2 conflicting intangible situations, the playoff revenge and perhaps a little bit of a letdown. Gee, they're off our backs finally for a week.
Yeah. Henhut saying surprise Eagles are favored here. They were. It's funny. They were plus 2.5 at New Orleans, and Now they're -2.5. It's a 5-point swing. It's kind of strange. PlayStation bit of yeah. All right, we move to the late games. Washington at Arizona. I was very upset that Washington looked so good on Monday night, because I was looking at this game on the advanced spread. I saw Arizona was -5 or 5.5. I was like, man, Washington looks great here against this horrible Arizona defense. Like, they'll be able to keep up. And apparently now that people know this, and the line has fallen to 3.5. I don't know how long that's going to remain. But this is another tough one for me, just given the loss of value here that we had with Washington potentially getting 6. It was close to 6. Now it's 3.5. Both of these both these defenses are abysmal. So this could be another game where there are no turnovers or punts. I kind of lean toward Arizona given the line value. Actually, no, I lean toward Washington getting the 3.5. Sorry. If this were 3, I think I'd be leaning toward Arizona. I think that's how close this is for me. Do you have a strong take on this game?
Oh, I do like the over in this game. Two good offenses going against two suspect defenses. Now, last week I was on Detroit, laying the 3 at Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good spot for them coming off of that loss to Tampa Bay. And also, I just think they're the better football team. But Washington and Arizona are two teams that I had pegged before the start of the season that I would be looking to play on both of these teams, because I thought they would both be improved as the season progresses, especially with Arizona getting Marvin Harrison Jr. and Washington getting Daniels at quarterback, and also stability in the organization of Washington with Daniel Snyder out and the new regime in there, and basically a new start. And I liked, of course, Dan Quinn, the hire of him with Washington. So it's tough for me to pick a side in this game. Certainly, I would have looked at Washington getting 6 points, because if I like two teams and I can get more than 4 points in the game, I'll generally look at playing the underdog, because I think their chances of being improved are just as good as the other team at about roughly the same rate. Although I think Arizona might improve a little bit quicker, simply because of the experience at quarterback edge that they have, being in the league with Kyler Murray for a few years versus a rookie. But the 3.5 makes me a little leery of laying it with Arizona. Of course, we did see what Arizona did against the Rams 2 weeks ago, and that had to be a nice confidence builder. And Detroit's a much better defensive team than I think a lot of people give them credit for. So the fact that Arizona struggled against them last week to put points on the board, at the same time, this poor Arizona defense, they held Detroit scoreless in the second half. Mm-hmm. So how do you explain that? That makes it a very difficult game for me to play a side, especially at 3. I might lean to laying it with the 3 if it goes down a little bit further. But probably the one play I will make on the game is over the total.
Condolences to anyone who had the over in that Detroit-Arizona game, because there were 30 points in the first half, and there's 3 points.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it was very, very bizarre. I was expecting Arizona to come back, because I also had Detroit. But I was thinking the worst case scenarios. I was thinking, like, man, Arizona's going to take this here because Detroit just stopped scoring. But that never happened. It was very bizarre. We have some questions about, from Chris, for example, any advantage Washington having Cliff Kingsbury on their staff? He says, I know there was a gap year, but he still should know Kyler well enough. It does hurt that Cliff wasn't on the team last year, so he knows the personnel less, but he does know Kyler Murray, so
yeah,
there is that. So I think you have to keep that in mind.
Did he coach him at Texas Tech? Kingsbury? Or was Mike Leach there at the time?
I'm not sure. But
Mike Leach might have been at Mississippi State by then.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, he does know Murray. However, on the flip side, some people are saying, John, for example, says Redskins need to travel cross country in a short week, and then Hen Hunt says long trip for Washington after road game at Cincinnati. Yeah, that's another angle you could take here. So I don't know which one's stronger. I feel like they cancel each other out. Maybe I don't know. This is a tough one.
Yeah, I like I say, I probably would lay 3 with Arizona. It's one of these games that I won't play with a great deal of enthusiasm, but I'll take 4 with Washington, lay 3 with Arizona.
Yeah, it makes sense. Andrew says he recruited Murray to Texas A&M, but he didn't coach him. Okay. And John saying a new Call of Duty doesn't come out until October 25th. Ride the Cardinals until then. That's true. All right. Next game, Patriots at the 49ers. This is another injury game where Just don't know who the Niners are going to play. George Kittle was out last week. He may come back. Deebo Samuel probably out again, but you never know. Trent Williams got banged up. Javon Hargrave out for the year. Nick Bosa's banged up, though he did play last week. Travarius Ward was banged up last week. And, of course, McCaffrey's out, but he's not going to come back on IR. So there's just so many injuries here for the 49ers. For me, it really depends on who plays. If they're only missing, like, Samuel and McCaffrey and, of course, Hargrave, then I might be on the Niners here because the Patriots are the worst team in the NFL. However, if they're missing so many personnel, it's just going to be tough for them to cover the 10. But I don't really want to bet the Patriots either. Like I said, I really want to avoid taking or betting the worst team in the NFL. So I'm rooting for the Niners to have most of the personnel so I can take them here. I don't know if I'm going to bet this game. Any thoughts here?
I'm wondering when the last time – I'm going to answer the question, by the way. I'm wondering the last time the 49ers lost 3 games in a row because they've been such a strong team for the last 4 or 5 years. And guess what? It was last year. I think they started 4-5-0 and lost 3 straight and then went on a long streak. So to think that they can't lose 3 in a row, you only have to go back 12 months to find out that they did exactly that and still made it to overtime in the Super Bowl. So it just shows that it's a long season and I mean, it's not quite like starting 0-3, but you have a 3-game losing streak in the middle of the season. That you can almost say that it's an 0-3 for that spread there. I do like the 49ers here coming off of the loss, especially the way they lost to the Rams. They were in total control of that game, and Williams goes out, and we'll see what happens this week. But I just think they have too much talent, and it allows some of the backups to get some important playing time for injuries down the road. So at 10 or less, and the line's at 10 right now, I'm inclined to be on San Francisco. That might actually end up being a play. It hasn't been one yet, but it probably will be.
Okay, yeah, I assume the injuries will dictate that. At what point do you not take them?
Probably if Williams doesn't play.
Okay. Is it okay?
I mean, the Patriots are decent defensively, not great, but decent. That could slow things down a little bit. But part of the reason, again, last week about going with the Rams, I think I mentioned earlier, didn't know how Purdy would perform with all that great talent not available. He performed well.
Yeah, and
now he's going up against a weaker team. Although the team he played last week did get blown out by 31 points the week before.
Right. He has back soreness now from carrying the team, I suppose. Chris saying, should we bet the Patriots money line as the 49ers for Survivor pick? Someone out there is making a killing fading these Survivor plays in the Survivor contest. Yeah, I mean, if you want to follow the trends, the Patriots money line is the way to go. Although it's good. I don't know.
Well, it worked in week 1.
Yeah.
It's Cincinnati. Nearly worked in week 2.
Yep.
They went to overtime against Seattle.
Yeah. And
the Jets were one of the more popular Survivor picks last week against the Patriots on Thursday night, which was surprising for a number of reasons. The most of one being they were playing their 3rd game in 11 days.
Yeah, it was
not that they weren't the choice on the Survivor. That was such a huge choice. Who went who didn't have any concerns, and as the game turned out, they didn't need to have any concerns.
Yeah, that's something we looked up on the show last week. Team playing the 3rd game in 11 days. It was like 4-9 against the spread in the last 13. So it wasn't good. However,
I also wonder how much it was to be playing 4, and this may have been the first time. I don't know. 3 games in 11 days to open the season, coming right out of training camp.
Right. Yeah, it is bizarre scheduling, and the Patriots had a tough thing themselves because they were coming off an overtime game playing on Thursday night. Teams, by the way, playing off overtime on Thursday are 5-25 against the spread.
Yeah, that would make sense. And the NFL they do a lot of things that make no sense. You're playing the New England Patriots week 3 Thursday night, so you make them open the season on the West Coast, going to San Francisco. They go back home, and then make them fly down to Tennessee in week 2, knowing they have to play 4 days. Why didn't they at least give them a home game for week 2?
I don't understand the NFL scheduling at all. For example, you have the Niners have had a tough schedule too. Like they played the Monday night game, then they traveled twice.
So
I don't.
One was a short trip to to LA, but
right. So just bizarre scheduling here. Anyway, next game, Browns at my Raiders. Raiders they look great after week 2. I was so proud. Then they let me down. I think they were a no-show. I think coming off that win in Baltimore, come from behind, and I think that
was my concern.
they took Carolina for granted. I had the Panthers
Mhm.
in one of the cars in the Super Contest with Aton. Here, the Raiders are favored by 1 against the Browns. I've seen some pick'ems. Cleveland's offensive line is a disaster. They haven't had their tackles. Jedrick Wills returned last week, but he got hurt right away. And then they lost Wyatt Teller, their best offensive lineman. He's out now. So they're going to have to try to block Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins with 3 backup linemen. Good luck with that. And then Myles Garrett says he needs surgery on his feet. So he's not playing.
Both legs.
Yeah,
Both,
exactly.
I think
So,
both feet. Yeah.
yeah, so he's not playing his best. The Browns are not getting to the quarterback. They struggle to get to Daniel Jones. This Cleveland team is just awful. Like Deshaun Watson looks like he's playing with an injured shoulder, just the way he's like shot putting the ball every time he throws. So as appealing as as unappealing as the Raiders looked last week, I am on them here. I think they bounce back because Cleveland is just a disaster. I know the Raiders lost to the Panthers, but I think they bounce back. We saw their potential at Baltimore, and even the first game against the Chargers, they were winning or tied for most of the game. Like they were up 7-6 at halftime. It was 7-3 for a while. Just they gave the game away with turnovers. I like the Raiders here on a short line. What are your thoughts on this game?
Well, let me first go back to the first game we talked about, and you just talked about Cleveland. How much does it devalue Cleveland with the performance against Dallas in Week 1? And how much does it say about Dallas, given the fact that they beat a team that we thought was going to be a pretty good, that not necessarily you, but that was generally thought to be a pretty good team, and Cleveland has not performed to be that. So,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's going to change any minds, but it should put the Dallas game in a little bit more of a uncertainty. Well, it does for me anyway. But as far as this one goes, I completely agree with you. I'm down on this Cleveland team. I didn't really expect as much from them this year as a lot of people did. It is a good spot for the Raiders, especially because they did last week what I thought they might do coming off of the Baltimore win.
Yeah. I think to your point, where that's a great point about Dallas. How about Jacksonville too? In Week 2, they beat Jacksonville, and you're thinking, okay, all right, this team's not bad. And then you see Jacksonville against Buffalo.
Well, and then Cleveland only scored 18 points against Jacksonville.
Yes.
They struggled offensively. They won the game because Jacksonville couldn't score. In fact, it's funny because I think I wrote this somewhere, that you go back last year, Cleveland, I think they had the best defensive numbers at home and the worst defensive numbers, or near the worst defensive numbers, on the road. And this year they start off with a horrible defensive, well, not horrible, but a bad defensive effort at home against Dallas. They limited the yardage, but not the number of plays and all that. And then they come up with a very good defensive effort on the road where they were terrible last year. And then last week they reverted back to a poor defensive effort at home, which they'd shown in Week 1.
Yeah,
and that's not saying I'm expecting a better defensive effort on the road this week because they did that in Week 2. But I'm just saying that this Cleveland team is not nearly as good defensively as they were last year.
Yeah, and their only good defensive effort this year was against a team that hasn't scored against anyone else.
Yeah,
the Jaguars have been miserable. So it's very fair to question Cleveland's strength of schedule here. Whereas,
I think it also puts Dallas's win in a little bit more of a negative perspective.
Absolutely, yeah. We've seen them since. So, yeah, it's I get what you're saying about that first game. I don't know. I keep going back and forth about whether Dallas is superior to the Giants, at least substantially. I just don't know. I may not bet that game, or it may decrease my bet.
I'm not trying to talk anyone out of it. I'm just saying, in other words, if I can only find reasons to play one team and not the other, I pass the game because I'm subconsciously being biased. There are always reasons to play both sides in the game. It's just a question of which of those reasons carry the most weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a good point. John says, surprised you took the Raiders. Well, it's 3 out of 4. I did not take the Raiders last week. Just to be clear here, I was leaning toward them at the beginning of the week, but then when they benched Bryce Young, and then when I saw the injury reports for Crosby and Wilkins, I backed off and went with the Panthers. I actually had the Panthers on the card with Aton. Anyway, next game, Chiefs at the Chargers. This line basically says that Justin Herbert's out. It's going to be Taylor Heineke against Kansas City here. Chiefs favored by 8.5. I like the Chargers here. The Chiefs generally do not win by margin early in the season. This is a team that someone said, I can't remember who, they said they're basically like a cat playing with its food in the early parts of the season, where they do stupid stuff on the goal line, experimental stuff to see what works. Travis Kelce looks like he's coasting right now. He's going to be great in the playoffs, I'm sure, but right now it looks like he's just going through the motions. I really don't see the Chiefs going all out to play the Chargers, and this is going to be like the Chargers Super Bowl here. Especially with the backup, I think they're going to play very hard. The one caveat, though, is the Chargers' injuries. Joey Bosa left last week's game. Joe Alt is going to be out. Derwin James is suspended. Rashawn Slater left last game with an injury. So if Slater and Bosa are back, I like the Chargers here. But if everyone's out, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow. So I may not bet this game. But either way, I'm going to be in the Chargers. Just depends on the unit count. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I share those thoughts. I would like to be on the Chargers as well. Want to see what the injuries are. Again, I'll probably say it every time we talk about the Chargers. They went from one of the worst coaches in the last 25 years to one of the best. And yet they still managed to lose, 6 or 7 games last year by 3 points or less, or by exactly 3 points. I think 3 points or less. So they were competitive, even with a poor coach, and a good coach would turn those at least half of those losses into wins. So the Chargers certainly had the talent more than what were they, 5-12 last year. And I think that Harbaugh knows the difficulties he's going to face here. Number one is let's keep the ball away from Kansas City. So let's use a lot of short passing games with Heineke if he's the one who starts, and maybe that'll set things up for maybe an occasional long play, or more importantly, open up the running game a little bit more with the short passing game to be concerned about. So sort of like make the defense react a little bit too quickly. And yeah, 8.5 is a big number for, again, even Kansas City this year, as you pointed out. They've not been able to really put their foot to the metal. They literally won their first game against Baltimore by 2 inches, an inch, whatever the toe was, and then of course they had to come back late against Cincinnati, and then the win last week easily could have been a loss. If Atlanta had been a little bit better in play calling and execution at the end of that game Sunday night. So Harbaugh. And let's see, I'm trying to know. I don't think he coached against Andy Reid while Reid was in Kansas City, unless he did maybe his last year before leaving the 49ers for Michigan. So maybe there's a little bit, but that's still a decade ago, so it doesn't carry much weight there other than knowing maybe the tendencies. But I do think that Harbaugh will have a good enough game plan to at least keep this game competitive. If there are turnovers on the Chargers' part, Kansas City could win easily. But, yeah, you're right. Kansas City is not in their playoff mode is approaching form.
Yeah, if this were a playoff game, I'd be all over the Chiefs. They'd be trying a lot harder, but there's really no motivation for them. They're 3-0. They have nothing to really play for here. So we have the Sunday night game, Bills at the Ravens. I thought, before the Monday night game, Baltimore was favored by 2.5. I thought that coming off that huge win against Jacksonville, I thought the Bills might be favored by 1 after that game, but the line did not move. I was very surprised by that.
I'm seeing solid 2.5s and a few 2s out there.
Yeah, so it's remained stagnant. So I was down on Baltimore entering the season just because they lost 3 offensive linemen. Their defense is not as good. Their cornerbacks are very shaky. They had to sign Yannick Ngakoue to improve their edge rush. They lost Patrick Queen. It seems that this team is not as good, nearly as good as it was last year. So I was not surprised to see them start 0-2, and then they beat Dallas, but Dallas has been very shaky otherwise. So I'm leaning toward Buffalo here, but I also have concerns about Buffalo despite them being 3-0. Like, they have some major injuries on defense. The 2 linebackers are out. Their safeties are all gone from last year. There's still development with their receiving core. It seems like Josh Allen's only comfortable throwing to Shakir. And so if the Ravens take away James Cook, I wonder if the Bills are going to have consistency offensively. But I'm still going to be on Buffalo, but I don't plan on betting this one. This is one of the more confusing games of the week for me. I couldn't figure this one out. Do you have a strong take here?
I'm not strong, but I'm also on Buffalo. It's as much as I like Buffalo, and I'm guessing they didn't really make an adjustment in the line because look who the Bills beat last night. I mean, Jacksonville beat them handily, but Jacksonville really looked like they weren't very interested in playing that game after about the first 3 minutes. But it's more a concern that 2 weeks in a row, and yeah, they had a big lead last week. Yesterday or Sunday against Dallas, and they had like that 10-point fourth quarter lead against the Raiders. And the fourth quarter, they allowed a lot of easy plays to be completed. Now, it cost them in the Raiders game. It almost cost them in the Dallas game. You're up 28-6 going into the fourth quarter. you should at least play a little, especially after Dallas scores at 1 touchdown. Okay, to make it 26-12. I think they went for the 2 and missed it or something like that. At that point, your defense toughens up because you just have to be reminded, hey, look what you guys did last week when you were in a somewhat similar situation with a comfortable lead against a bad football team. Now you've got a comfortable lead against what is acknowledged to be a good football team. And it nearly cost them the game. So I have some concerns. Maybe it's conditioning. Maybe it's they're wearing down in the fourth quarter. I'm not quite sure. I do like the way this Buffalo team is playing. And I think part of it may be subconsciously, no one's expecting them to do anything. Not do anything, but hey, they've come so close in the past. We're not even going to pick them to make the AFC Championship game this year. We got Cincinnati. We got Baltimore. We got Houston. We got Kansas City, of course. Yeah, Buffalo's had their chance. Their window is closing. Well, it ain't shut yet.
Yeah. Tom had a good our guest on Saturday. He called them the Milwaukee Bucks. Because he liked them this year. Whereas it seemed like in the past before they won the championship, everyone were always picking them to go, and then Giannis because of Giannis, etc. And then like the one season, no one picked them as the year they won. So maybe this is Buffalo's year. John says Bills win 47-0.
It's hard to say that they're an under the radar team, but given the depth of talent and good teams in the AFC, maybe they somewhat are.
Yeah, they could be. Like I said, I was concerned with their chemistry heading into the year, and I've been off of them the first 3 weeks, and it worked against Arizona, but not so much after that.
Well, they have some tough games coming up at Houston, then at the Jets, then they host Tennessee. That shouldn't be at Seattle. You could be looking at a team that's 7-2 or so. When do they have they have their bye week in looks like week 12.
Mm-hmm.
So, which by the way will be good for them in the playoffs. I like playoff teams that have their regular season bye weeks late in the season.
Yeah, that was we have a source with the Lions, and that person was very angry that they had a week 5 bye when the schedule came out. So that was I could definitely see that.
And by the way, there's just as an aside. Why doesn't the NFL do something smart? Well, maybe that's sort of an oxymoron there, emphasis on moron. But why don't they give buys to like all 4 teams in the same division the same week? Wouldn't that make sense?
It would, and they can play. They can play the Thursday games with teams coming off buys. So
that should also be the case. Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense. And why do they also not scale? Baseball's doing it also now. Well, baseball's doing the opposite. You'd like to see the final week of baseball, all division games. And you got teams like Kansas City playing Miami or something like that. It's ridiculous. I do like the fact that the NFL has division games for the final 2 weeks of the season. Why not make it the final 3 weeks so that all divisions will basically be decided in the final 3 weeks because they'd all be rematches of earlier season games?
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
It'd be very interesting, very compelling.
Yeah, for sure. Chris says this line feels like it's begging for Bills money, but it looks like action is pretty even. That was my thought too. When I saw this, I'm like, man, they're really looking for Buffalo money here. But yeah, the public's not taking them, at least not yet.
Well, why wouldn't they be looking for Baltimore money laying under a field goal at home?
Well, I just think because it's the last thing they saw, I guess, because they destroyed Jacksonville. That's true.
But they didn't adjust the line. That's the thing.
Right. Yeah, and Baltimore did kill Dallas pretty easily. So that's a good point.
It's a misleading final score, but the fact that they had troubles in the fourth quarter for the second week in a row with a supposedly comfortable lead has to raise some eyebrows.
Yeah. Chris, I hope your source of the lines is Rory himself. It's sorry, Chris, it's not Rory.
Is it Dan Campbell?
Not Dan Campbell, who's a TV star now.
That's okay.
All right, we have 2 Monday night games. I love, by the way. I just wish they would stagger these games, like start 1 to 7.
Yeah, there's another stupid thing of the NFL. I mean, I hate complaining about the NFL because I love it so much, but from a business standpoint and more importantly, a fan standpoint, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, would you go 7 and 9, 7 o'clock, and then 9 o'clock? There's a little overlap there, but
start the second game when the first game is coming out of halftime, basically 2 hours, maybe a little bit, maybe early third quarter. Yeah.
Yeah, Monday night games used to start at 9 o'clock Eastern, so it shouldn't be an issue. I mean, we complain about the NFL so much because we love it. We want to see it better,
and that's why they don't do anything because they know we'll watch and we'll love it, even if they do stupid things.
Yep, exactly.
Like the onside kick. How stupid is that?
Well, you have to
declare the
onside kick.
Yeah, first of all, there's only like about a 5% chance, if that, anyway. Now you're going to make it like a 1.5% chance. What, Dallas had the first one successfully the other day? I mean, it takes a lot of the intrigue out of the game. And the new kickoff rule is pretty stupid.
Yeah,
By the way, the NFL is talking about player safety, right? That's why they're changing these rules. Yeah, let's go ahead. We're, within 2 years, we'll have an 18th game. That's good for player safety. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Explain that one.
After they have 18 games, they're going to push for 20. You know it, right? Yeah. and those playing on 3 days of rest on Thursday night, they really don't care about player safety.
Yeah, no, of course not. No. Well, see, that's what we talked about before. They could cure that with the bye situation to give them the week off, so they have 10 days off between game 1 and game 2, and then 11 days off between game 2 and game 3.
Right.
They go from a Sunday, a bye, a Thursday, and then the fourth week would be a Sunday. That would, and by the way, that would improve the quality of the games because it would allow players to have more time to get over injuries or to reduce them.
Yeah, I mean there are more injuries.
Length of the severity.
I did this research in my first book that there were more injuries on Thursday night games than any other games on the slate.
Which is expected.
Right, and it just you can't say you care about player safety when you're asking guys who hit each other super fast to play on 3 days of rest. It's absolutely ridiculous. But
you're just asking for more concussions.
Yeah. And the international people were bringing up the international games. Andrew says NFL will schedule a game in Afghanistan next year. Qatar first. I was gonna troll Goodell on Twitter, he's banned me from the combine. I was going to say like, hey, have a game in Ukraine next year. Don't you care about Ukraine? So
just schedule during a ceasefire.
Right, exactly. Or if he doesn't care about player safety, then if he gets some more money, then maybe the ratings would be higher if it's not during the ceasefire.
Well, look at all the games. Thursday nights on Prime now.
Right.
Okay. No, the Congress in 1977. NFL will never be on pay TV. Well, cable, of course, is pay TV, but now you're talking about something even beyond that because cable is pretty much standard, throughout the nation. But now you got Apple TV and everything. So they are taking the game away from the fans or making the fans pay more than they should to have access to it. Fortunately, there are still we've got sports books and everything that show all these games that are not available on local or broadcast or cable TV. But what about the guys who A, are on fixed incomes, B, don't have a lot of friends to hang out with, or live in places where it's tough to get reception? Those are the people that can't watch these games, and those are the fans.
There were a lot of people in Philadelphia here who were very angry that they couldn't watch the Eagles Packers game because it was on Peacock.
What about the Comcast situation or the Disney situation, rather? Disney situation.
Yeah, this older guy I know. It was like, he's like, what's Peacock? What channel is that? It's like, well, good luck.
If he's an older guy, he should know the Peacock is associated with NBC. Proud as a peacock.
Right. But he was like, what channel is that on Comcast? I was like, it's not on Comcast. Sorry, to buy this game. So
it's on your phone.
Yeah. You'll have to next NFL games will be on Crunchyroll before you know it. John says North Carolina and North Korea has beautiful front property.
So will Nevada when that big quake comes in California.
That's true. All right. So
we've delayed talking about this exciting Tennessee-Miami game long enough, I think.
I'm very excited for this game just because I've lost so much money on Tennessee this year from that stupid week 1 game where they doubled the Bears in yardage and Will Levis completely fell apart.
Held them without an offensive touchdown.
I was unbelievable. 17-0 lead just goes away. Week 2, they outgain the Jets. They allow a block punt for a touchdown. Yep. And Will Levis has this backward shovel pass that's a fumble, and he takes a horrible sack in the red zone at the end of the game. So that's another game they could have won, but they definitely should be at least 1-2 right now, maybe 2-1. And then last week, I don't know what happened there. The defense, which was great the first 2 weeks, fell apart. I think it was Matt LaFleur just out scheming whatever Tennessee was doing. So I don't expect Miami to do the same. I think Mike McDaniel has lost more stock as a coach in 2 weeks than I can ever remember anyone losing. I've lost so much respect for him with his horrible game plans. He just doesn't appear to know what to do in 2-minute drills. Last week he had Alec Ingold outtouch Tyreek Hill by triple. By the time Skylar Thompson threw 13 passes, Devon Achane touched the ball 6 times. I really don't understand what he was doing. And on top of that, he gets Tim Boyle on the active roster when his team destroyed Tim Boyle on Black Friday last year. I really don't know what Mike McDaniel's doing. So
he should probably have looked at the Green Bay game plan.
Yeah, it pains me because I know we're just going to lose again. I'm on the Titans here. I love taking good defenses against horrible backup quarterbacks, and this is the case here with whomever the Dolphins tried out there. And I know Tennessee's defense looked bad last week, but they're still 10th in EPA. So I'm going to trust them to rebound, at least defensively. Now, I know Will Levis might spoil this again, and I've said this before. I'm almost by this rate, I'm expecting ESPN to release a 30 for 30 a decade from now saying, like, Will Levis fixed games just, with inexplicable turnovers. And I'm going to
unintentionally, however.
Yeah, and I'm going to be like, yeah, I was there for every one of them. I bet on him every time. But no, I'm going to be in Tennessee again. This is one last chance for the Titans. If they screw me again here, I'm done with them. But this seems like their best chance for a win outside of Chicago in Week 1. So, are you on board here? What are you talking about?
Miami could say the same thing, playing a team that's 0-3 and getting them at home in basically a pick 'em game. Not that it matters to them what the point spread is, but. There are two things that, I talked at the start. We talked about, don't overreact to teams, and teams never as good as it looks at its best, et cetera, et cetera. Well, another one is the bookmaker's advantage is 11-10. The bettor's advantage is selectivity. I don't have to play this game. I can't find positives for either team except possibly that Tennessee has shown some decent defense, and I can't say that about Miami. But how can Miami take advantage? With the lack of quarterbacking that they have. Tyreek Hill is only, I guess the only time Tyreek Hill could be a factor is if Tennessee scores often enough that they're kicking off and they're using him as a kick returner. But that means they're trailing. So I cannot think of a good reason to play. I mean, I could speculate on reason, try and convince myself, but I can't come up with any hard, solid reasons for playing either team in this game. I mean, wasn't surprised that Miami lost last week. I thought they could be a little bit more competitive, but losing Skylar, during the game certainly didn't help. And the backup to the backup isn't generally very good anyway, especially the one that they had the experience with. So I've got to pass that one. And fortunately, I like the next game.
Okay. So G checks out. Any guess on if Tua ever returns? I think he's out for the year. I think he'll be back next year. I think he wants to play again. He could retire, but I think he's going to push to play, and I think he'll be back next year. But
a lot of his contract, I believe, is guaranteed. Not all of it, but a lot of it, I believe, is.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I hope he can get over it, but it's one more concussion could be the end for him. So it's a scary situation. I'm releasing my updated 2025 NFL mock draft tonight / tomorrow morning, and I'm gonna have Miami taking quarterback just because Tua may retire. So anyway, so you said you like this one, Seattle.
By the way, is Ryan Tannehill still available somewhere?
He is
back to Miami.
He is available. Mike White was on this roster in the preseason. I don't know why they got rid of him.
Is he on the practice squad or is just outright released?
He was released. I don't understand why. They deemed Skylar Thompson to be better somehow, and they added Tim Boyle onto the rest of it. I really don't understand what Miami's doing. It's just I went on a multi-tweet rant about Mike McDaniel during that Seattle game. I'm done with him. So. Anyway, so Seattle, Detroit, the better of the Monday night games here. You said you feel strongly about a side here. I'm leaning towards Seattle just because Detroit's secondary is quite horrendous, and Seattle, the past couple of times they played Detroit, they've thrown all over them. They have a strong passing attack, and
I think they covered last year in an overtime game, didn't they? Maybe they won the game in overtime.
They were 6-point underdogs. They won in Detroit last year. So I'm on Seattle here. Is that your side?
No, I actually like Detroit here, coming off of the uninspiring win at Arizona, where once again they couldn't do anything after halftime, following the loss against Tampa Bay, again where they couldn't do anything in the I believe the second half of that game. Even though, let me see what the numbers were in that game. They outgained. Let's see, Tampa Bay were outgained 463 to 216. in the game that they beat the Lions. So the Lions have sort of, I guess, been sluggish the last 2 weeks, especially after halftime. I think it's this being a national game, this being a game in which they also have that bye coming up next week. So I think that they can, be a little bit more aggressive than they might otherwise as far as some of the play calling goes. I'm still not sold on Seattle. I mean, they beat a Denver team in the year, the first game of the year, a rookie quarterback making his first start and making it on the road. Then they played a tough game that they won in overtime in New England. And then they beat a quarterbackless Miami team last week. So I think this is their real first true test of the season as far as the quality of teams that they've played. And when you look at Detroit, who they've played, they played a Rams game and a revenge game for the Rams that, they were fortunate to cover with the touchdown in overtime. Another stupid rule for the NFL. They should give both teams a possession at the start of overtime. Then they beat a playoff team from last year, albeit not a great one, in Tampa Bay. And then they went down. They lost to Tampa Bay at home in that last home game. And then they go out to Arizona and play a team that was on the under the radar board for a lot of folks this year. So I think this is an important game for Detroit, especially going into their bye week and seeing the kind of play that both Green Bay and Minnesota within their division are doing.
That's a good point. Especially with Seattle's strength of schedule is very, very shaky.
You can't really penalize Seattle because you can only play the teams on your schedule, but you do have to put in context as to their path to getting to today's game. How is that compared to their opponent's path?
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. I feel like I just can't evaluate them correctly under this new coaching staff,
which I like, by the way.
I do too. It's just hard to know how quite good they are because they haven't played anyone, and now we get that test here with Detroit. And you're right, like the Lions haven't played their best yet. I kind of wonder if maybe they've ascended to like the Kansas City mindset where, they know they have bigger fish to fry come January. And
it's kind of like the situation with Baltimore defensively in the fourth quarter of the last 2 weeks. That's got to get the coach's attention. Whether they can do anything about it, I don't know. But same thing with Detroit. They've had no problem moving the football up and down the field, but they've had trouble cashing in, especially in the second. I mean, what was the score in that Tampa Bay game? I think it was like 9-6, 5 field goals to start the game in that one. So I think that the coach can use those last 2 weeks where they did a lot of things that they expected to execution-wise, but they didn't cash in when they got inside the red zone and had the opportunity. I think that could be like a coach could give them a little wake-up call, say, hey, this is not last year. You have to take every game and every play in every game and give it your best. Whether that works or not, I'm not sure, but the coach at least has that at his disposal.
Yeah, and Chris bringing something up where the Seahawks beat the Lions last year. The Lions were banged up in that game. Remember, Amon-Ra St. Brown was hobbled, so yeah, you can't really look at that last year's game as a barometer. John asking, what would the spread be with the 0-3 Bengals versus the 3-0 Seahawks on a neutral field? I actually wonder if the Bengals would be favored.
If it's the healthy Bengals against the healthy Seahawks, I'd probably make the Bengals 3.5.
Oh, 3. Okay, yeah. I think
If I'm a bookmaker and I like the Bengals, I'd make the Bengals 3.5. Let them take Seattle. If I didn't have an opinion on the game, I'd make the Bengals 3. I think that's a fair number.
Interesting.
You're talking about a team that's overachieving in Seattle, albeit the competition, against a team that's seriously underachieving in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think.
Although again, they played Kansas City on the road to 1 point, had the game won.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they really did. And they had that unfortunate fumble return for a touchdown. I believe they outgained Kansas City in that game. Not quite sure. Actually look that up right now, but I would have said I think I would have said Bengals -2.5, so we're pretty close.
They ran about the same number of plays, and it was Cincinnati 320 and Kansas City 286, so they did outgain them by a little bit.
Yeah,
and turnovers were Kansas City lost 3 turnovers, Bengals just one, so that that explains a little bit of the yardage edge.
Yeah, and that one turnover was the big one, return for a touchdown.
Yeah, the touchdown.
Yards per play was Cincinnati 5.2 to 4.8. So they won in that regard too. So yeah, I going back to that game, I like Cincinnati a lot this week. So Chris says, so this game will be Seattle -2. If we're in Seattle, the Lions are only 2 points better than the Dolphins. No, it would be
they're more than 2 points better without Tua.
Yeah. So So if it's Cincinnati -3 at versus Seattle on the neutral field, then it would be what, Cincinnati -1 in Seattle. Would you give 2 points to
It'd
Seattle?
probably be 2-point advantage. Yeah, might be Cincinnati 1.
Yeah, because it used to be, the old adage used to be 3 points for home, but
Yeah.
that's not the case anymore. They've downgraded that. Yeah, Andrew says Joe Burrow fumble was the reason Kansas City wasn't it. Yeah. Burrow doesn't fumble there. I think Cincinnati takes it. So, yeah, that's it. We went through all the games. Again, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. This is awesome. I love doing the show with you. And yeah, hopefully
you've turned my dinner into now a late night snack, which is fine.
Well, it's 9 o'clock on the West Coast, so it's not too bad for, especially for those on the East Coast here.
In a 24/7 town, I have no issues.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. Whenever I'm out there, I'm like, yeah, you have all the options in the world. Although they've closed the buffets at 2 o'clock, I've noticed, ever since COVID.
That was the one at the Westgate, I think, for lunch. I think. Are you talking about 2 a.m. for dinner?
Oh yeah. 2 o'clock.
Not that many buffets open anymore. A lot of them did not open after COVID.
Yeah, I saw like some of them are open till 2 p.m. and they're not open for dinner, which I was very upset about because I wanted.
Yeah, I think that's the Westgate. I think they're open for breakfast and brunch, I guess.
Yeah, because we went a year ago. But I was like, I was always wondering like what to do for dinner, and I was like, oh, one night I'll go to a buffet because I always love them, and then they weren't open, and I was very upset. So
we just have the national brands now around town. Golden Corral.
Yeah.
They're annoying commercials.
They were horrible. Yeah. Well, Chris asking.
Although the food is good.
Yeah. The one I've been there once and I liked it. So, Chris asking, are you betting the Tigers to win the World Series?
I am not.
Okay.
I think it would be nice to see them in the playoffs. To get to see Skubal pitch a few times in postseason play, and they have been playing very well. In fact, I'll just mention this on baseball. This is going to be on a numbers basis one of the weakest playoff fields we've had, simply because usually you have a team that'll win 100 games. We're not going to have any such team this year, I believe. Not only that, you're not even going to have a team that's winning 60% of its games, which is basically 96, 97 wins. I don't know that anybody's on pace to win that many games, which is something that is very unusual. I don't remember. I think it was maybe like, I think I read 2014 or something was the last time that you didn't have a team win 100 games or something like that in a season. So that makes it more wide open for a lot of teams to have an opportunity. We'll see if I've liked the way the Padres have been playing over the latter part of the season. I've not been impressed with the Dodgers for a little bit, and I have to say the Mets have looked very good, although without Lindor and McNeil. Their path is a little bit difficult, and they don't have outstanding pitching. And I know, Walt, you're probably giving the Phillies a decent shot, and this might be their year.
I'm so out of tune with baseball. When someone in like July was like, "Oh, the Phillies in first place," I'm like, "Oh, really? I had no idea." So I can't name 3 people on the Phillies. I don't even know if I can name one. So I'm not.
I think you could name at least one.
Oh my God. Is Reese Hoskins still? No.
No, he's from Milwaukee.
Bryce Harper. Yes.
Yeah, that's the one I figured you'd definitely mention him. Aaron
I
Nola. He's been around
he's the pitcher, right? Yeah. Okay. I got 2. I don't know about 3.
It'd be nice to see the Tigers in the postseason.
I know Kyle Schwarber. I've seen his name.
Yeah.
And Castellanos. I don't know how you pronounce his name. But yeah.
There's 4 of them already.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm
pretty soon you'll give me the starting lineup.
I'm over the total. I can't. I don't know what their positions are outside of Nola, but anyway, I'm not saying Golden Corral might be the worst food in America. I disagree. I've had some bad food. Golden Corral, it's good. It's not great. I think it's good.
It's what you expect.
Yeah, but Andy's right. The commercials are awful, but anyway. So, Andy, thank you so much once again. Please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Visit the link in the description of the merch store. Check out Andy's site, thelogicalapproach.com. There's a lot of information on there.
I'll be starting, by the way, to put up the weekly statistics for football, college and pro football. I'll be doing that probably in the next 24 to 36 hours. I haven't been updating a lot of baseball because football's been taking up most of my time since mid-August, but I'm gearing up to put some information up there for the playoffs.
Nice. Anything else you want to plug, or just the site?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So enjoy your dinner.
It's too late. It's too late to let people know about my availability for proxying contests, other than those who want to be in the Westgate reboot, because that starts in week 10. But you got to be here in Vegas to sign up for that.
Yeah, so yeah, I should mention that for next year, if you guys want to enter the Super Contest, definitely reach out to Andy.
Or
He's
the Circa
or
Millions.
right. Any contest, Andy is a phenomenal proxy. In fact, if you forget to submit your card, which I've never done, you said you will just automatically pick the 5 largest underdogs, which I think
pretty much the 5 large. That's the default if they don't get me in. It's getting close to submitting time. I send reminders out as we get close, but should they not get a hold of me for whatever reason, the default is put in. And yes, I'm reading on the screen now. 5.5 point underdogs, 14-2 against the spread this year, and I think they're not much different straight up. They're pretty close to. I think it's double-digit wins straight up.
Yeah, you got to think there's going to be regression to the mean, but I don't know about this week, but eventually we'll see.
Well, this might be a good week because there aren't really a lot of huge favorites, and there's really not a lot of. I mean, is there any matchup on the board that you're really thrilled about looking at?
You mean just for a fun
from an aesthetic standpoint, from a fan viewer standpoint?
Well, Dolphins Titans.
You're reading the list upside down.
Yes,
that's exactly. At the bottom.
I think
Minnesota, Green Bay, I think is compelling. Philadelphia, Tampa, Washington, Arizona because of the potential high score.
Yeah, Bills, Ravens Sunday night should be fun.
Yeah,
Seahawks, Lions should be good.
Maybe, yeah. But I mean, there's 5 games. Those are the 5 games I'd have to play on my contest card because I'd be eliminating everything else really. But no, there should be a regression. But you know what? Let's say the odds are 1,000,000 to 1. This might be that 1 in a million. Mm-hmm. Now you'd have to have 1,000,000 seasons play out to find out if it's even 1,000,000 to 1. But the fact that it's like conspiracy theories. The fact that something is possible doesn't mean that it's probable, likely, or will even occur. It just means that the percentages are not 0. Maybe 100 zeros and 1, but whatever it is, the point is here, same in football, that we one situation here where we think that we've got to have a regression doesn't mean it's like a winning streak has to end. But at what point does a winning streak end? You might say, or when do you consider a winning streak to be a significant indicator? The old theory is if the team wins like 4 in a row, you keep playing on them because you can only lose once. But that also implies that you played on, at least the 2 or 3 of the first one. So you end up showing a profit at some point, even if they lose the next game. So, for percentage, it's like percentages. And I love analytics, but one of the things about analytics is it says, okay, this team has a 63% chance of being successful because that's what the percentages say. That's true, but you have to consider the circumstances because it's not going to be 63% successful. It's either going to be 100% successful or 0% successful. Okay, it's the same thing when you talk about playing certain situations with trends because they've been 63% or whatever. Well, at some point they are going to regress unless there's mathematical formulas that tell you when something is not due to chance. But then again, it's kind of like a player, let's say a baseball player is hitting 300 over 500 at bats. He could go 10 for 10 and he's hitting 302 because the 10 hits offsets the first 10 of that 500 at bats. That might have been 3 hits. The larger the sample size, the more likely the averages are going to hold true over an extended period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you said about the trends. Trends can be very dangerous, especially if you can't make logical sense of them. I think that something like the Thursday games with the teams coming off overtime playing on Thursday, they tend to struggle. You can actually
there's some validity to that, but now we don't know if there's cause and effect, but it's a reasonable conclusion to reach.
Right, and like that at least makes sense. But I've heard trends where it's something crazy. It's like, oh, this team is 13. For example, I saw someone bring up yesterday. Bills are 0-6 against the spread at home on Monday Night Football. So bet against the Bills. And that's such a small sample size. And why were they 0-6?
I used to be, when I first started, I was heavily into trends before I started getting more into the stats of it. And the way that I've evolved over the years is the way I look at trends. And let's use the situations that you said. The Buffalo Bills are 0-6 on Monday nights at home. Mm-hmm. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Bills are 0-6. It means that the public has overestimated the Bills 6 out of 6 times when they played on Monday night. Doesn't mean the Bills had anything to do with it. It was what the public thought about it, and it so happened that the public overestimated them because they made them lay too many points. They weren't as good as the public thought they were.
Mhm.
That's the way that I look at trend. So a trend that is 14-2 means that the public underestimated either the situation or the team involved or the combination of the two in that situation. But you brought up the key point: small data sample. The larger the data sample, the more significant it is. But then again, it takes even a little bit of a run. You could go 0-6 the next 6 times, and the trend could fall from 65% to 63% because there are so many data points in the sample size, even though they've gone 0-6 the last 6.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, well, I mean, what's to stop them from winning their next 4, and suddenly they're 4-6? Why would they be 0-6? Like, is there a reason? Like, does Josh Allen just really struggle at night for some reason? Like there's no reason for that. But then if you take their road success at night, they're better. It just
on Monday nights.
Yeah. Like, it just doesn't make much sense. Or even night games in general. For example, they won at Miami, so on Thursday night. So like, why would they suddenly be bad in night games? Like, it's just, plus it's such a small sample size, only 6 games. Like anyone taking the Jaguars just because of that, I thought was just a huge mistake.
Well, not only that, because it brings up another point, and that is it's over an extended period of time. The Buffalo team of 2023 has a different composition than the Buffalo team of 2019. There may be some carryover players. Injured players may have played an impact in some of those games, etc. So if there is a quote unquote trend or situation that I follow, I will base it more on how a team does under a specific coach. Like Pittsburgh situations, I'll place some stock in because Mike Tomlin's been the coach forever. Right. John Harbaugh's been the coach forever at Baltimore. So there may have a lot to do with coaching in certain situations that make it a lot more valid or New England with Belichick for all those years. Okay. It's a lot more valid than with a team that has had 5 coaches in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's still not necessarily a reason to play on it, but it's something at least to be aware of when you're talking about the same coach.
I totally agree with that. And I was big into trends a long time ago. I got off that. I feel like everyone has a trends phase. It's almost like experimental phase in college, like you go through it and you just get over it and then you become smarter. So,
and the more conditions there are to a trend, the less I believe in it. In other words, if a team has to meet 3 or 4 criterion, that I don't like. If it has to meet 1 criterion, I like that a little bit more because you're not trying to what do they call it, backtrack or whatever. Backfit. You're not trying to backfit something. Oh, okay. Well, okay. This trend is 72%, and it's got 15 components. Well, if I take out 2 of them, it's now 70%. I take out another 3 more, it's 65%. Now I'm only stuck with 8, and if I take out 6 of those 8, it's down to 52%.
Exactly. Yeah, it's almost data mining at that point, where you can come up with a great trend for something, and it just is completely meaningless.
Well, I think that they have this thing called Z-score, which relates to the success rate relative to the size of the sample. Mm-hmm. I forget exactly what the formula is. I have it written down. I have it in a spreadsheet somewhere just to see. So it says that if a situation occurs, it's like if you toss a coin, it should be 50-50. But if all of a sudden over 1,000 trials, it's 650 and 350, that tells me you're using an unbalanced coin.
Yes, that's true. I was sometimes I ask people, like, and it's funny. Some people give me the wrong answer here. I'm like, hey, if you're flipping a coin and he goes heads, what's the odds of the next flip? And like some people are like, oh, yeah, right. Some people are like, oh, heads.
See, let me put it to you this way: the odds of tossing heads 6 times in a row is a lot higher if you've already done the first 5.
Sure, right.
That's basically what it's like. Same thing with a streak. The odds of winning 6 in a row are, well, that's a different because that's not a 50-50 proposition. Although technically it is, but winning 2 in a row is 1 out of 4, et cetera, because of the 4 possible results: win, lose, win, lose, win. So, interesting theory. Have we put everybody to sleep yet?
I think it's very interesting. John says tails never fail, and I prefer Walt's over under trend.
Which was that?
What was that? I'm not quite sure.
Oh, was that maybe that was the one that you hit where you named more than 3.5 Phillies?
Oh,
you were over.
I was over. So that's a trend to look out for. So and one last thing, I was like talking to someone. My sister says 3 daughters, and so like when she found out that she was having her 3rd daughter, I'm like, oh, cool. This is a 1 in 8 shot that she would have all 3 daughters. And I said that to someone. I'm like, no, it's 1 in 2. They're like, well, no, it's 1 in 2. I'm like, well, no, it's 1 in 8 that it'll be girl the entire time. And they're like, no, it's 1 and 2 because boy, girl. I'm like, you just don't get it. So yeah.
Well, he was talking about the individual next occurrence. You were talking
Right.
about the sum of the three occurrences. Yeah, there after the fact, even before the fact, it's 1 in 9 that she'd have 3 of one sex or the other. After the facts, well, 1 out of 8 will hit from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some people just don't get it, but that's okay.
Yeah.
At least you don't have to. All right, so Andy, I feel like your dinner here is going to be an early breakfast if we keep going. So again, thank you so much, Andy. Check out once again thelogicalapproach.com. Andy will be joining us later on the season, so I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, good luck, guys, with your bets. If you don't listen again for this week, tomorrow I'll be back with Kenny to talk about fantasy football. Thursday we'll be on after the Thursday night game, and then Saturday with Tom. Tom's gonna be on Saturday this week, so looking forward to it. Andy, again, thank you so much, and
it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a lot of fun. Oh, and thank you especially to First and Goal for the 279 super chat and Andrew for the 499 super chat. Just really appreciate it, guys. All right, guys, have a good night.